How to simulate impressionistic painting. I had an idea about how I might do that in Scratch, and I spent some time with it, and it was popular among the Scratchers, and I decided to spend more time with it and show you how I do it. So let's try it. Open up a new project in Scratch, and we're going to import some pictures. I found these in different places. I painted one of them based on a famous painting, this one, and then I found a clip art of sunflower, which I changed a little bit, and a tree clip art that I changed a little bit. But you can find your own images. I like images from nature and thought those would be good for simulating. So I'm going to delete the little costume that comes with Scratch and make just a little tiny dot about the size of the smallest square in this grid. Too small to really see. Now open up the pen extension and we want pen down, we want erase all. And we want pen up again. So pen down and pen up is going to make a little dot. And then we want go to random position because we're going to make randomly placed dots. Then we can set pen size to see about 6 and see if that's large enough for us. We're going to select a pen color. What we're trying to do is set up a series of commands that can detect color. So create a new variable that's called color or color number. And once we are able to detect a color and its number, we're going to record that in here. So let's just test it by putting in different numbers and seeing if it then creates a dot of that color, different colors. You can see different colors for different numbers. Each color has a number in Scratch, and we want to record that and then set our pen to that number. So that's why I dragged the color number into the pen color space there. Now we're going to create a block that we can call something like detect color, and we're going to click this little don't refresh screen because we want it to go fast. There's going to be a lot of little commands here, a lot of processes that we want to go very quickly, and that's the way to do it. So we can drag the little block like that, a little initiate block, and then we're going to start with setting the color to 0, and now we're going to repeat through a whole bunch of numbers starting with 0, and then if we can detect the color with this inbuilt Scratch command, then we'll stop and say, hi, that's the number that we want. So Scratch has this sensing command, touching color, true or false. So then we could say if touching color, then we stop. We've got the number. We're going to cycle through a bunch of numbers by this repeat loop here. Repeat 16 times. And now we're going to go to the variable section and insert increase variable by 16. So increase variable to 16, and we're going to put it right under that repeat loop. So after it repeats 16 times, then we're going to increase the number by 16. And then we're going to repeat that whole thing 32. You'll have to have faith in that number and the 16 number for the time being. This should be changed by 16. Not set color to 16, but change color. Now another change color, just duplicate the other one. Change color by, and now we're going to use the multiplier under operations and say 7 times 256. 536. The whole thing will be 7 times 6, 5536. Change color number. So another repeat, 32. It brackets the whole thing, and another change color number. This time we're going to have it multiplied by 256 times 256, which is like 65. Now it turns out we've done a section for blue, a little repeat section for green, and then red, and each of those colors ranges from 0 to 255 in Scratch. Really, that's 256. A range of 256 for each color. So we're going to drag this block up. Now we've created our detect color block. Detects the total colors, a combination of blue, green, and red. Now when we click on this series of commands here, it detects the color, moves to a new random spot, detects that color, and so on. And you can see the number changing there. So it's detecting different colors, and if we set the pen to like 100, we can see it'll put a dot down of the size it just detected. Now 100 is way too big, but it shows us that it's working. If we move this whole block up under a green flag, so drag it over a green flag, and these commands, erase all, set pen, and click the green flag, it's going to move to a random spot, detect the color it's at, to move to another random spot, put a dot down, and so on. Now let's create a new block called paint one dot, so we can have a very clear command that's just about painting one dot. Of course we want to paint more than one dot, so let's try a repeat loop for now, something like paint 10 dots. So repeat 10 times, and of course that should paint 10 dots. So we're getting there. What it's doing is detecting the color underneath the sprite, the color number, and setting the pen to that color number, putting down a dot of that color, repeating that 10 times. Let's create a variable for brush size. So just brush size, so that we don't have to keep typing it in. We'd rather give the user a slider so they can choose quickly their brush size. Let's also set a range for the slider to help the user, so we don't give them a crazy range, just something reasonable. That'll make a nice painting. Gives them a range to experiment with. And we drag the brush size variable over here where it says set brush size to. That simplifies things for the user. Now we could try repeating lots of times, having it put down lots of dots, and see what it looks like. Let's move the brush size up a little bit so we can see the tree. We can try several thousand. You can tell by the small brush size that we have, we're going to need several thousand. Now the larger the brush size, the fewer dots you're going to need. But for now, let's just test it with several thousand and see if it's working. It's working, but it's a little slow. Now here's a way to speed it up. Let's create another block called paint a few dots. And then we're going to check don't refresh screen, so that it'll paint a few dots before we have to look at it, and that speeds up the process. So if we repeat 15 dots, then this block is going to create 15 dots all at once or very quickly before we have to look at each dot. So of course we want to repeat many sets of this, paint 15 dots. So let's grab another repeat block and put that around to paint a few dots. And let's repeat that at least 1,000 times. And this does seem to speed up the process a bit, but yet we can still see dots being laid down. We want to see it paint, I think. We want to see the little dots going down so we can enjoy that process. Okay, now we wanted to paint more than just a tree. We wanted to paint also our sunflower and so on. So let's insert under looks, let's insert change backdrop to. We can make a variable here so that we can change the variable, which will then determine which of the backdrops we can see. So sunflower is one, we can call it flower. So let's create a variable called subject and then drag that over to where it says set backdrop or change backdrop. And also let's make it visible on the screen so people can see what's about to be drawn. Once we select the subject. Now to give users a way to select the subject, we could tell them, well, punch in a key. So let's try that as an event. If a certain key is pressed, then switch to subject. For example, if they press T, then switch subject to tree. We can copy that and then make one for flower, like press F for flower. And for trees, we could have press S. So drag over the subject where it says change backdrop to subject now. Okay, so we have one for 2, now 3 of our subjects. Try your own subjects, or I have more subjects. Now we can make this painting look a lot more impressionistic if we put some variance, some random color change into the painting, especially where it's monochrome. So drag an if statement here, and then we're going to select from the operators a greater than, and we're going to also select pick random, say from 1 to 100, and if 1 to 100, a random selection from 1 to 100 is greater than, say, 85 or something like that, then let's change the color a bit. And I've found that changing the brightness and saturation creates the right kind of variation here. Let's set it to be within a range, a random selection within a small range, like -20 to +20. We can try that. Now let's move this little block, this if, and then block, if then block, right before the pen actually goes down. So we have selected the color, and then we change it a little bit with a certain probability, and then it puts the pen down. So we've changed the saturation, higher saturation being a little bit like brighter, but it's a technical term for more color. Now let's create a variable called deviation so that we can limit the range nicely that it changes, but set it within a certain limit that the user can vary. So I'm going to just drag deviation to both the saturation and the brightness. Now to create the negative deviation, we just multiply deviation times -1 so that the range is within a negative, say 20 to a positive 20, or -10 to positive 10, whatever the user selects with the slider. And you can see how this creates sort of a speckled effect, especially on the sky, which is really where it's very monochrome without this effect. So now it has a sort of dappled effect with a range of brightness and saturation. Let's move things around a little bit to make it look nicer. We can see the tree better. Move the subject away from the tip of the tree, and so on. See how it works. And we should be able to, we can select the sunflower, or just flower, and see if it works there. This subject is pretty monochrome too, so a little deviation helps a lot to have range of saturation and brightness, give it a more dot-like effect or dappled effect, which I think looks more like Pointillism, almost a kind of an Impressionism here. Let's move set brush size down to where the dots are being painted. This way the user can change the brush size at any point in the painting. At any time points, they could change the size of the brush this way. I think that's a nice option if you want to switch to smaller or larger as the painting goes along. You can start with small dots or start with large dots and then add small near the end. A real painter might make that kind of choice. Another thing that can make this whole process look more like a real painting is to have a blank canvas in the background. So a backdrop that's just blank. And how could we do this and still get the painting? Well, we could switch back and forth from a blank canvas, blank background, to the subject material. So let's drag the set background command here. So it's going to paint a few dots, 10 dots or so, and then switch to we're going to create a blank background and just call it blank. And then when it goes to actually detect the color, it's going to switch the background to the subject. So the user or the viewer will see a blank canvas like this and then see the painting appear as little dots against the blank canvas, when what it's really doing is switching back and forth, kind of like a painter's eye would do, going from the painting subjects like the real flower or a photograph of a flower. Their eye goes from there to the blank canvas, then puts down a dot. The number of dots that goes down here should be fewer if we're using a very large brush size, and we're going to need more dots to cover the canvas if the brush size is very small. So the brush size is like the diameter, I think, of the brush, linear. So the area taken up on the canvas is going to be brush size squared. So I'm going to pick a number of dots that are going to be put down and divide it by the brush size squared. Brush times brush is the way you do it in Scratch. So then selecting the right number in the numerator there, divided by the brush times brush, should be a way to correct for any changes in the brush size. So the number of dots is fewer. If we have a larger brush size, then we're going to need a lot more dots to cover the canvas if the brush size is smaller. And that's where experimentation comes in handy, because we want it to look nice. We want it to look like a little bit like an impressionistic painting. And if you have too many dots, it can look really blurry. And this is the effect we get. Now for the sunflower. It looks nice to me. I like it slow, so I can enjoy the process. And the ones I published on Scratch, I put music of Debussy in the background, which some people associate with Impressionism, so they can enjoy the music while they see the dots going down as if a painter's doing it. And the third subject material is trees. Now that one takes longer, but it's my favorite. And there's more detail in the background subject, so I don't think this one needs the deviation. I set the deviation to 0, and I think it looks very good. Whereas the sunflower and the single tree are simpler, and so look better with. But the way we've set it up, the user can be creative and vary the brush size and deviation as they wish.